Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and we can officially say that the pond build is complete. It's hard to believe that 6 months ago this was just an open peanut field, and now we have this beautiful pond here. And that means there's only one thing left to do, and that is add fish. We got the fish guys coming later today, and the pond's about 99% full. I have one last thing to do before it completely fills up. Alright, we're only about 3 inches away from the pond being full, so the last thing we have to do is install this drain cover. Probably a two-man job, but unfortunately it's just me out here today, about to load it up, see if we can get it installed. So the purpose of the drain cover is just to keep the sticks and debris from going down into the pipe and clogging it up. And this particular cover works really good because it actually overhangs down into the water. And so once the water starts overflowing into the pipe, all of the floating logs may get pulled towards the pipe, but they won't be able to go down in it. So you can basically just call it a trash rack. Alright, so the dealer's instructions were to use those little gray plates in there, and there's a screw hole right in the bottom, and they were saying screw it through your pipe. Well, I don't really want to add extra holes in that pipe, because once the water level fills up, it could go through those screw holes. So I think what I'm going to do is get some U-bolts, and right here where these poles are going across, I think I'm going to clamp those down onto the edge and see if that'll secure it. So, got to make a trip to the hardware store, but that should hold it in place for now. So the fish truck just showed up, and we're using American Sport Fish to stock the pond. And that's also the same company that built the pond. They're located in Montgomery, and that's where all their fish hatcheries are. And the biologist there recommends stocking ponds in 3 phases. So first you start off with your bluegills and fathead minnows. And then after the weather warms up in the spring, you stock the threadfin shad, because they're a little finicky and don't do really well in cold weather. And then we all know that the bass spawn in the springtime, so right around May is when the bass will be about 2 inches long, and that's when we'll stock them. So before we add the fish, he's going to measure the temperature of the pond and the dissolved oxygen. And he likes for the temperature of the water in his tank to be less than 7 degrees different from our pond temp, which it was only 2 degrees different. And then you can see here our dissolved oxygen is measuring somewhere between 12 and 13, which is really good. Any number between 7 and 10 parts per million is usually what you look for, and if your numbers are ever 3 to 5 or lower, you're definitely going to have water quality issues. But with our number being above 10, that means the pond water's in great shape. Now it's time to add the fish. So today we're going to be stocking 6,000 bluegills and 6,000 fathead minnows. So if you take a look here, the fathead minnows are long and skinny, and the bluegills are a little bit shorter and wider. And the fathead minnows won't make it very long. They're kind of like a Kickstarter for the bass in the pond. They're really easy targets and easy for bass to catch and feed on. And the bluegills are the exact opposite. Some of these will probably be in here for years and years to come. And the difference with the bluegill is a lot of them will hide in the structure and different types of habitat in the pond. And throughout the year they'll spawn and reproduce and create more bluegill, and they kind of become the staple diet for the bass in a pond. Man, they are piling out of there quick. And so far it looks like we got a really good survival rate. That's one of the benefits of doing this in the wintertime. These cooler waters help them transfer, and it's a lot easier on them, and they don't have the stress whenever the water temps are high. But I've got a GoPro down there in the water, and you can see some of them are swimming back up in the shallow areas. But this time of year, probably most of them are going to go out deep, because that's where the warmer water is in the pond right now. So the goal for all of these bait fish over the next few months is for them to get in there and find all of those hiding spots, those underwater brush piles and tunnels, and all of that structure that we put into the pond. Because imagine this, if it was just a bowl out here, and you put all the bait in, and then when the bass got in, they would eat all of the bait right away, and none of them would survive long enough to reproduce. So by putting them in before the bass get in, it gives them a chance to acclimate and even grow a little bit before the bass arrive. Now a lot of you may have the question, why are you putting in fish that are so small? And there's several reasons for this, and the main reason we're putting in small bluegills and fathead minnows is because the bass that we're going to be putting in are going to be small as well. Outside of our pets that we're putting in here, the majority of the bass that we're stocking in the pond are only going to be 2 inches. And there's several advantages to stocking a pond with newly hatched bass. And the first one is how aggressive they are. And we're going to stock the pond with tiger bass, which is a mix between a northern and a Florida strain bass, and they're extremely aggressive. And one of the keys to stocking them at 2 inches is they've never been caught. So if you can imagine a pond full of Mobies out here, that's what it's basically going to look like the first few years. They're basically going to swim around and eat everything in sight and grow like crazy. And another big advantage to stocking small bass is that you can be confident that you have the right size bait in there. So when you start out with a new pond and all your bass are the same size, you can achieve some really good growth rates because there's an abundance of bait in the exact size that they need. So you may think, man, if you stock 2-inch bass, it's going to take forever for them to get big. Well, these tiger bass are known for growing up to 2 pounds a year, and in some cases even 3 pounds a year. So several videos back you saw us install a couple of these bluegill feeders. So our plan is basically going to be to feed the bluegills a really high protein diet, and then that'll also trickle down to the bass, and we should see some really good growth rates in those first couple years. And another really big advantage to stocking a pond with small fish is that's the least expensive way to do it. So small bait this size is really cheap, and you have to look at it from the hatchery standpoint. The longer they have to raise those fish and feed them, the more expensive they're going to get. And the fish that we stocked, they're about 30 cents a bluegill, and the fathead minnows were about 7 cents a piece. And one of the last but most important advantages for stocking bass this small is the fact that they're a pure F1 strain. And that basically means they're the first generation. And if you think about the initial fish that we stock in this pond, those are going to be the first generation, and each time the bass spawn in years to come, that'll be the second generation and third and so on. But what the biologists have found is that the initial F1 generation are always going to be your most aggressive bass, which will also mean they have the best growth rates and potential to become that big 10-pounder. So now that the pond build is complete, let's talk about some of the upcoming projects. So one of the things we want to do next is build some sort of a fish camp or a lodge out here. But as a lot of you have seen, the housing market is pretty crazy right now, and a lot of the contractors in this area are backed up 10 to 12 months. So we really didn't want to wait that long to be able to have a place out here to spend the night. So we found this place that builds these custom cabins, and they build it on site at their own location, and then once they complete the build, they transport it here. So we've gotten started on building our own little fishing cabin, and the turnaround's probably going to be somewhere around 3 months. And we're probably still going to build a bigger lodge out here in the future, but again, that's going to take some time, and maybe something you see next year. So I try to read all the comments in the videos, and one guy had a really good idea. So we did a night lapse in one of our last videos and got a cool shot of the moon coming up. So this comment said you should put the GoPro in a corn pile and film a night lapse of the deer coming up to eat it. So I thought that was a really good idea. We're going to spread some corn out right here in this area and watch that deer activity tonight. And the first to show up are the doves, making their rounds, eating the corn. Oh, and check that out. That's actually the mineral block over there that kind of looks like a hay bale. But let's see what comes out tonight. Alright, the first deer is starting to show up, and man, that is pretty impressive with the stars in the background. So everything is moving a little fast. I may have to play around with these settings and slow some of the deer movement down, but I don't know, that looks pretty cool the way you can see all the star movement in the background. And I can tell we've got a mixture of does and bucks coming through, and I bet you could get some pretty impressive photos. But man, I could sit here and watch this all day. And you can see as the moon's going down, it's starting to get a little darker and darker, and we're probably not going to be able to see much. So that was a really cool idea. Definitely going to be doing that again in the future. So I went back and got a screen capture of one of the bucks, and man, that is an incredible shot. Might have to put that one in a frame. So it's been a little while since we've seen the fox squirrel that we call Foxy. So I went out and got this to try to draw him out. Check this out, folks. A squirrel picnic table that you attach corn on the cob. So I'm going to get it set up right here on Sarah's picnic table. I also have some peanuts and another variety of mixed nuts we're going to put out and see if we can draw Mr. Foxy out. I'm just saying, if I was a squirrel, I definitely would come and join this picnic. And the first one to find it is a possum. He said this looks too good to be true. So I'm out of here. And next up are some birds. And then a bunny rabbit. Oh, a little mouse found the stash. This should be interesting. That greedy little guy, he almost cleaned the whole table out in one night. And look who finally shows up, the squirrel who it was intended for. Sorry, buddy, the mouse cleaned house. Better luck next time. So now let's check in on the ducks, Allie and Bam Bam, and then the one other duck that we haven't named yet. Because we got some big news, they started laying eggs. We'll talk more about that in just a second, but we really have enjoyed having these ducks because I don't know, there's something about the ducks. They just always seem like they're happy and in a good mood, curious about everything. I don't know, ducks are just good pets. But we've never had ducks before, so maybe some of you can give us some advice. So once they start laying eggs, what % of those eggs are fertile and could actually create a baby duck? Because I know with chickens, a lot of the eggs they lay aren't fertile, but I'm not sure about ducks. So maybe you all could give us some advice on what we should do with the eggs. And if you think they're gonna hatch. Because we are coming up on the spring, and that is the time that you typically see baby ducks swimming around the pond's edge. But these guys really are a lot of fun, and we'll try to start showing them some more in future videos. Alright, pond is at full pool, and let's take a look at the emergency spillway. Water comes up there right to the edge of that flexomat, and that's perfect because if we get a couple inches of rain, water's going to overflow right down there through our emergency spillway and flow back down there towards the wood line in the creek. And water's flowing out of the pipe right now just a little bit because we got some rain here earlier this morning. But you really want that pipe to be able to handle most of the rain flow, and only have to use the spillway in emergency conditions. And a lot of you guys warned me about the bucks rubbing on the small trees. Sure enough, they've already done it, so I definitely got to get some tree savers. It's basically just like a small protective cover that goes around the base of the trees. I thought they may eventually do it, but I didn't think they'd do it that quick. So this pipe should do the trick. It's basically like a corrugated pipe. I cut it to the right length and added it on all the new trees down this bank. Alright, now let's take a look at some of our game camera footage. When the weather's cold like it has been, everybody comes out at night. And the raccoons have been pretty interesting. They definitely hang out around that pond's edge every night. And then after they get done feeding, they swim back home. And we've definitely started seeing signs that the rut is in full swing. The bucks have been chasing the does around. We've been seeing a lot of fighting. And then also seeing the bucks walk around during daytime. Because even on a farm, they're usually pretty smart and they get nocturnal this time of year. But when the rut's in, they're always going to be out and about. And we got the smaller owl hooter using one of the trees that I just planted as his hunting post. He's definitely too big for that tree. So this is something interesting I hadn't seen before. It looks like the buzzards are interested in the corn pile. But check this one guy out that's got his wings spread. I'm guessing they use that as a sign of intimidation. Or maybe claiming that particular food. Because it definitely looks like it's working and the other buzzards are leaving him alone. But one other thing I wanted to mention to you all is leave some comments down below on future projects you'd like to see that involve the pond, or even some that don't, that are just out here on the farmland. We're going to have some free time here in the upcoming months as we wait on the right conditions to stock the rest of the fish. So whatever ideas you guys have, just leave them in a comment down below. We'll try to do as many as we possibly can. Now it is time to feed Mr. Moby. Alright folks, that's going to wrap up this video. I really appreciate all of you that have hung around this entire pond build series and made it all the way to the pond stocking. But make sure to hit that subscribe button. We got a lot more coming in the future. Hope you all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.